Hi, everyone. We're doing our presentation on improving Florida's energy portfolio. This is what Florida's current energy portfolio is broken up into as of 2020. Natural gas is responsible for most of Florida's electricity, followed by nuclear power, and then renewable energy, and then coal-fired plants, and a very small portion of the electricity generated comes from petroleum-fired plants. As of 2020, natural gas was responsible for approximately three-fourths of Florida's electricity generation. It's remained the majority since 2003, back when it first surpassed coal. The small amount of electricity generated from petroleum comes mainly from using it as a backup power source for natural gas plants. The second largest source of electricity generation in Florida is nuclear power, at around one-tenth of Florida's total electricity generation. There are currently two nuclear plants located on Florida's Atlantic coast. Renewable energy is responsible for around 5% of Florida's electricity generation. Most of the renewable energy comes from solar energy, with biomass accounting for the remainder of the non-solar renewable energy. The key to achieving true sustainability with energy production and consumption is looking at a wide range of different renewable options and implementing that into a state's portfolio. To improve the energy portfolio of Florida, our group proposes that Florida transition to mainly solar energy that's supplemented by both wind power and nuclear power. Currently, Florida is on the right track with solar energy production growth. From 2018 to 2020, the electricity generation from solar power installations nearly tripled. Continuing with this growth would enable solar power to become more prominent and help meet current and projected demands. With regard to nuclear power, there are two plants that were proposed and already received licenses, but were indefinitely put on hold due to its high costs compared to the low gas costs in Florida. Looking at ways to either lower these costs or better reflect the actual cost of natural gas in Florida would be potential ways in making nuclear energy more feasible. Currently, wind power isn't feasible on a wide scale in Florida. New developments in wind turbine technology can likely change that in the near future. Taller towers, turbines with larger rotor diameters, and new control systems are all being developed to capture consistent wind speeds at higher elevations in Florida. The current average of most wind turbines are around 380 feet, but these new taller turbines are almost twice the size at 660 feet. This applies to the onshore wind turbines. Further development of this technology would make the cost and efficiency of wind turbines much more feasible and give it a substantial room to play a big role in the energy future of Florida. This chart shows the projected growth in capacity for renewable resources in the next 10 years. What stands out is the large amount that solar is projected to grow, getting to nearly 20,000 megawatts in the next 10 years. Most of the other renewables don't come nearly as close. Wind power isn't projected to grow at all in the next 10 years. It's important that this differs with the development of new wind technologies so that it grows much more in capacity in the next 10 years. Already, I mentioned that Florida consumes a lot more electricity than it produces. Looking at the chart, it looks like the peak energy demand in 2030 will be a little over 60,000 megawatts in the summer and nearly 60,000 megawatts in the winter. With solar power only expected to grow to 20,000 megawatts in the next 10 years, it's clear that this transition to solar energy will take many more years than that to be the primary source of electricity in Florida, unless it's heavily expedited. Until then, it's important to continue decreasing reliance on coal while transitioning to solar as well as using wind and nuclear power to supplement it. It's important to note that if solar, wind, and nuclear, only solar and wind are truly renewable while nuclear energy is technically finite. Despite this, nuclear power is still capable of supplying power for many, many, many more years to come. Looking at the emissions, the sources of electricity that we proposed all have very low amounts of carbon emissions. Nuclear, solar, and wind power are among the lowest carbon emitters of the renewable and traditional energy sources in usage today. We considered biomass as another energy to supplement solar as well, but biomass does produce substantial amounts of carbon emissions due to the burning of the fuel source. It does produce less than natural gas and coal, so perhaps in the short term, Florida can rely on biomass as it continues to decrease coal and natural gas to make up for the demand. By primarily relying on solar, wind, and nuclear energy, it's certainly possible to reach a net zero carbon emission by 2050 due to these energies' relative low amounts of emissions.
While Florida does not currently have a renewable energy portfolio standard like the one we are proposing, it does have a goal of reaching 100% renewable energy by 2050. On top of that, it also has several rules and regulations, some that limit sustainable growth and some that promote it. The main one that's limiting sustainable growth is that local governments cannot control what types of energy power companies use to supply their customers. So if a power company decides to continue using dirty fossil fuels when clean energy exists, they are completely allowed to do that because fuel restrictions can only be created and enforced by the state government. And then the laws that are promoting sustainable growth are at the state and local level. There are incentives such as tax credits and loan programs that apply to certain renewable energy technologies. And there are also state level rules and regulations, such as a sales tax exemption for solar panel systems and related items, a property tax exemption of 100% of the increased value for the residential renewable energy installations and 80% of the increased value for commercial renewable energy installations. And also, there's a rule that prohibits homeowners associations and other entities from prohibiting the installation of solar energy systems. Florida also has a net metering requirement, which is a billing mechanism that credits solar energy system owners for the electricity they add to the grid. That is applied to investor-owned utilities, which are power companies, of up to 2 megawatts capacity. While Florida doesn't currently have an energy portfolio standard, it does have a Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which is a set of goals that they are trying to achieve in order to help with energy efficiency and conservation within the state. Specifically, they aim to promote the development of renewable energy, protect economic viability of existing renewable energy, diversify fuel used to generate electricity, lessen the dependence on natural gas and fuel oil for electricity production, minimize fuel cost volatility, improve environmental conditions, and minimize the cost of power supplies to electric utilities and their customers. Now, there are limitations within Florida that could pose a problem to our energy portfolio standard solution. Specifically, Florida's constantly changing weather, including natural disasters such as hurricanes and tornadoes, um, as well as the time, money, and material requirements to produce energy, renewable energy sources such as solar panels, wind turbines, and nuclear power plants. Also, specifically related to nuclear power plants is that there is a lot of risks involved, and Florida's climate and topography does not help matters, as for wind power specifically, Florida does not have a consistent wind, and increased surface friction and turbulence caused by buildings, trees, and more limit wind capacity. However, as mentioned before, there is a new turbine that is in development that is much taller and could work in Florida. Florida also does not have any investments in hydropower due to its flat topography, making hydropower infeasible. So how we could make this energy portfolio a reality is with financial support, specifically decreasing the prices of solar panels and wind turbines, as the average cost of a solar panel installation for a home in 2022 is $16,000, which is infeasible for most homeowners. Also, with educational support of people needing to know the value of renewable and sustainable energy so that they can advocate for it, as well as needing to not be content with the current ozone-killing energy production methods such as dirty fossil fuels. People also need to be able to accept nuclear power plants as they are a very good source of energy. And there's also regulatory support that could be provided. While the current regulations in place are decent, renewable portfolio standards, such as the one we are suggesting, would be best. Local governments must also need to be able to stop utility companies from using certain fuels to get power to their customers in order to make any true progress. So in conclusion, we propose an energy portfolio for Florida which focuses on increasing investments in solar power, wind power, and nuclear power, which can be accomplished by decreasing the cost of solar panels, increasing education on environmental impacts and the cost-benefit trade-off of nuclear power plants, creating special wind turbines, and tweaking rules and regulations to better promote sustainable growth. And these are our sources that we used for this presentation.